I think we had like the near final draft before I finally clocked onto how much food there is. I mean, I will say that I think Jen, like my editor, I think she realized how much food there was, and I think she was fine with that. But I actually did not overtly realize this because I was just using food in various functions because in a lot of ways food serves as memory because actually all of the Taiwanese food in the novel is something that my mom made.
Welcome to the latest episode of the Skiffy and Fanty Show.
Bow to the inevitable. You will crave dumplings after reading this book.
This is true. And you will learn that bao and bao bun, only one of those is correct.
Indeed.
I learned this lesson from my Vietnamese family, that bao just means bun. So when you say bao bun, you're just saying bun.
Bun, yes.
Yeah, and that is in this book. A+, John. I'm Sean.
I'm Paul.
And on today's show, we are talking to Nebula Hugo, Ignite, and Locus award-winning science fiction writer John Chu. Welcome to the show, John.
Hi, thanks for inviting me.
Well, I'm excited because the second I heard that this book was coming, I immediately said, this is going to happen now. We have to have you on the show. So I'm glad I got to read it, and I'm glad we get to talk to you about it. This is going to be great. So John is a microprocessor architect by day, which is like the coolest title I think you could ever give someone. A writer, a translator, a podcast narrator by night. His fiction has appeared or is forthcoming at Boston Review, Uncanny, Asimov's SF, Clarkesworld, and Tor.com, among other venues. But today we're going to talk to John about his debut novel from Tor, The Subtle Art of Folding Space. This beautiful, beautiful book that I strongly recommend you buy.
Oh my.
Both to read it and also for the cover art.
But before we get into our discussion with John about the subtle art of folding space, a reminder to our listeners to please share your questions and comments with us. You can do this on social media where we are or at skiffyandfanty.com/listener suggestions. If you aren't already, join us on Twitch for Sean's Alphabet streams most every Friday at 7 p.m. Central to be part of our interactive live streaming show format. Finally, be sure to review and spread the word about our ridiculous show. Help support us through our Patreon and be part of our Torture Cinema polls, live watches, and other special Patreon-only events on Discord. A mere $1 a month will give you all that power.
This is true. All right, John. So to get us started, could you tell listeners what The Subtle Art of Folding Space is about?
I always preface my pitch with this, which is that in September, Tor sent me to the New England Independent Booksellers Association conference, where like the idea is to chat up independent booksellers to get them to stop your book. Basically, I was so bad at like pitching my book that booksellers were coming up to me and saying, "Please pitch your book at me." Because like basically I was so bad I was so bad I was entertaining, which I have no idea whether that got them to pitch, whether that got them to stock my book or not. But so I'm just lowering expectations. So the elevator pitch, and keep in mind that this is a very tall building. So at the start of the book, my main character Ellie, she has just missed the T to take the Amtrak down to DC because every weekend she goes to visit her comatose mother. Her sister tries to assassinate her on the regular on a semi-regular basis. And it turns out that the kilogram is no longer a fundamental constant. Like the kilogram is no longer a stable is no longer a stable known quantity. Now that last bit of it matters because she's one of the people who volunteers. Just want to point out she volunteers to do this. To basically maintain the physics of the universe. So if somebody finds a bug in the physics, she's one of the people who goes. She's one of the people who goes to fix it. Like there are this group of people that in the book that I call them the maintainers, and that's what they do. So she goes to figure out why the definition of the kilogram is now no longer constant, and then she sees her cousin Daniel, who shows her this mechanism that has been inserted into the universe to try to keep her mother alive, but it has the side effects of screwing with the laws of physics of the universe. That basically violates everything that her mother stands for, that everything that the in theory that the group of maintainers stand for. You don't change the laws of physics for your own personal gain. So she does what she knows her mother wants, which is that she removes this mechanism and well, the thing that she doesn't realize is that mechanism, perhaps that mechanism was placed there for a reason. Perhaps there were other reasons for that. So in doing this thing for her mother, she sort of propels herself into this mystery of why this has happened, and then she finds that she has made enemies that she hadn't even realized that she had made. So that's one axis. The other axis is that you find that this ties in back into her own personal history. And as things get progressively weirder, she has to make a decision about basically whether she can both save the universe and honor her mom's final wishes for her.
Yeah, I think that gets us the basic main elements of the plot. And I have to start by asking a big question, which I think the cover gives away. That question is the position of food in this book is very prominent to
And very important,
degrees that I
yes.
was not expecting, despite the cover cluing me in that there's going to be quite a lot of food. Because you have a character who seems to manifest food all of the time. There's plenty of dinner sequences and food things. And I was really hoping you could talk about why was food such an important component to weave into a book that is about people who maintain the physics of the universe or universes.
Okay, so true confession time. I actually did not realize how much food there was in this novel until I think we had like the near final draft before I finally clocked onto how much food there is. I mean, I will say that I think Jen, like my editor, I think she realized how much food there was, and I think she was fine with that. But I actually did not overtly realize this because I was just using food in various functions because in a lot of ways food serves as memory because actually all of the Taiwanese food in the novel is something that my mom made.
Aha.
So food serves as memory. Food serves as transmission of culture. Food is the way. Food is the way various characters bond with each other, and the way that I did create and develop their relationships. So at one point you realize that Daniel and his boyfriend Belt are probably meant for each other because Daniel makes for Belt's birthday this cake. Like it, like he the cake is spam and allium, so it's onions inside spam. There's a motet called Spam and Allium. Belt is an opera singer, so it's a musical based pun that's also a cake, and Belt thinks that's funny. So I can show through food that Belt and Daniel both have the same really horrible sense of humor. And then that's one of the ways that you realize that these two people, if nothing else, deserve each other.
Aw.
So food serves a lot of those purposes. Just as there's a scene where like my mentor figure Adi, like he decides that what he needs to do is to comfort Ellie. I mean, it doesn't really work, but that's and the way that he chooses to do it is through food. And then that is one of the functions. And then so basically as the church so basically food ended up doing a lot of heavy lifting, and the thing with Daniel manifesting status reports about the universe through food was that I just thought that was funny because you think, oh, I have to find the state of the universe, and you imagine that being something very serious. And I wanted something that was obviously absurd there, in part, if nothing else, to prepare you for the rest of the book, where Ellie just finds herself in increasingly weird, increasingly absurd. I mean, they're very serious situations, but they're also weird and then absurd. And then so that to some part is to prepare you for that, and also to tell you about Daniel, because it's actually explicit in the novel that other people don't do this. Other people just like make normal status reports. but he is the person that will give you a status report in the form of a fish. So that in some ways tells you who he is.
So yeah, I wanted to explicate a little bit more on the suite and carousel of characters, because it does feel like Ellie is the, although it's an outdated phrase, the only straight woman in this entire book. Everybody else is way off on one axis or another. So as our viewpoint character, Ellie is kind of, although she herself is helping maintain the universe, she's the most relatable. So I wanted you to talk about how you arranged all these characters on these various axes around Ellie, from her murderous sister to Daniel to her mother with her secrets, and so to her mentor and so forth. How did you put that like kaleidoscope together of that relationship web?
I think, well, very organically. I will say the thing that I did not do was go, okay, well, she is here, and which means yes, I realize this will work so well I'm gesturing, which will work so well on a podcast. I
Yeah,
just
but the
realized
but
that.
but the YouTube version would be great.
Right. But it's not like I guess what I will say is that I didn't intellectualize it in quite the way that you have suggested, which is that well, you have this person, and this person is further on one axis, and this other person is further. So I did not do that. What I did was what I typically do, which I have said a lot, which is I steal shamelessly from the improv playbook. Because improv in its purest form is you have two people, they step onto an empty stage. Because the stage is empty, it can be any place. It can be anywhere. It can have any items that you want. And then you have these two people, and they already have a relationship with each other. I mean, the actors, like the characters that they inhabit, whatever those characters are, they already have it. They already have a relationship with each other, and it's the job of the two actors on stage to discover what that relationship is. Like that relationship is already there. They are just interacting with each other and exploring to find out what that relationship is, and that's more or less what happened with every relationship in this novel, is that for example, Ellie and Daniel, the first time you see them, obviously the characters already had this relationship, and it was up to me to discover what that relationship was in the course of writing them. Also, I just kind of felt like this sort of book needed a mentor figure because to some extent Ellie is characterized as being relatively inexperienced, and then Daniel is characterized as being amazingly precocious. So I did feel like I just need there also needed to be like an actual, like, don't get me wrong, they're both adults, but but I felt like I needed like an actual adult, like basically somebody who could go, no, that's a really horrible idea. You were going in this direction now. So that was also part of it.
So part of what I wanted us to dig into a little bit, and you'd already mentioned this character, but the sister Chris, who you say just very casually at the very beginning, like attempts to assassinate her basically in the first chapter. We learn that this relationship is remarkably antagonistic. And I thought it was very interesting as I was reading this because it has reminded me of some of your other work in a different way, but the sort of complicated sibling dynamic where siblings don't get along, which has appeared in some of your other work as well. And I kind of wanted you to talk about that like writing that dynamic and exploring those kinds of complicated relationships between siblings that are antagonistic and I would say it would be fair to say fairly abusive in this in this particular book.
Okay, so first off, for this book, I actually ended up doing a chunk of reading on abusive relationships.
Oh.
So hopefully I am portraying an abusive relationship. I don't want, like, realistic is not quite the right word, because even in most abusive relationships, you don't have somebody trying to assassinate somebody else in the weirdest possible ways. But I was trying very hard to get the emotions and the sentiments true to life, that sort of to get into, well, why would somebody behave this way, and when somebody behaves this way, when somebody is abusive, what are the ways in which the person is abused. I'm not saying that these are the healthiest ways to behave. Like, she's not exactly like Ellie is not exactly modeling healthy responses to abuse, which I mean, people don't. So I was trying to get those reactions right. So part of it was part of it was that there was a part of it is that there was a certain amount of research just so for me to get that as right as possible, because there are people who read this who will have abusive who are unfortunately in abusive relationships, like that. This is not something I would want for anyone, but they, but that's where they are. And I wanted to make sure that they could see something that would at least resonate with them. So there was a lot of work there, and and a lot of it is sort of inspired by me not getting along with people. I don't get along with everyone. I would love to get along with everyone, but I don't. I mean, the thing about this book is that everything is heightened. So Ellie can't just be vaguely irritated by by having to do something. She can't just, she has to have sort of these, to some extent, very extreme reactions. And then because of who she is, what that means is that the things happening to her have to be very extreme. So a lot of it is that.
And I wondered as I was reading that, because since this is a multiverse, I wondered if the dials of people's reactions were kind of tuned a little higher than our own, that the melodrama was a function of the constants of the universe. Maybe I read too much multiverse fiction. Maybe not, but
Well, part of it is that her mother just died, and she just went to a funeral, and the timing of the novel is such. It's basically the next 2 days after her mother's funeral. So she is actually in sort of this very emotionally volatile place. Like, she is still struggling with her mother's death. And then while she's struggling with her mother's death, all of this really just deeply serious and deeply absurd things are happening. And she also has to save the universe. Like, I don't think her reactions are out of scale relative to all of the things happening to her.
okay.
I guess is what I'm saying. Because what is happening to her is actually, is incredibly extreme. Is incredibly extreme. She's basically having 2 days where everything somehow ties back to her mother's death. So she's being constantly reminded of her dead mother. By the way, every time I point this out, I feel the need to like chase that with that this is actually a really fun book to read. That is kind of wacky and it's a little goofy, and it is zippy. It's not 66,000 words of of unrelenting gloom and doom.
No, it's fun and fresh. It's also sharp, though. I mean, the whole relationship between Chris and Ellie is like, I mean, I know you're not part of the secret Amber cabal, but I am. I kept saying like, oh my god, are they Amberite siblings that just can't stand each other? That I can understand that they both can affect the multiverse, and one wants to kill the other. Okay, but no, it's just this. That feels like the proton and anti-proton that rotate around each other that the book runs on is that sibling
Yes.
dynamic, and you've built up everything out of that, and it almost feels channel, like every time things seem to slow down, you just throw another spark on that fire and off we go again.
Yes, let's see, Neil Harrison wrote this really amazing review. Like he clearly really liked my book. Like he wrote this really amazing review for Locus that was actually incredibly insightful. Like he clearly gave it a very close reading, which I'm thrilled about. But like one of the things that he points out, and then he's absolutely correct, is that Chris is not on stage very much. But basically throughout these 2 days, throughout this course of this book, she is constantly in Ellie's thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Because everything that happens somehow reminds her of Chris.
Yeah, she's colonized her brain, as it were. She can't escape. She can't escape Chris even in her thoughts, because what is Chris going to do or think about this?
Yes. And exactly, for me that's a crucial component of the book. Like, there are any number of cases where Ellie is like, no, I am going to do this because I won't let Chris have the satisfaction, for example. So that there are any number of cases like that. There are any number of cases where because her mother's final wish is that these two women get along with each other. And so part of Ellie's struggle through the book is sort of, well, okay, how do I get along with this person who is apparently perfectly fine with the idea of trying to kill me every couple of days? And that is a question that she sort of has to come to an answer. She has to have an answer for by the end of the book.
Yeah, I want to jump a slightly different direction and talk about the sort of genre conceit of this story, because as we've sort of been alluding to in a variety of ways as we've been talking about some of these other concerns, the characters in this story, pretty much everyone we meet, is in some way involved in maintaining, tweaking, manipulating, playing around with the universe through this very, I don't know how to describe it, like it's very sciency and yet also it feels fantastical in its presentation. I think especially in the very early scene when we see the skunk works and you're looking at all these pipes doing all this wild stuff and interactions. And I kind of wanted to start with a simple question, which is what made you think of the idea of people sort of managing the physics of the universe to make sure that everything stays intact? And then talking a little bit more, I guess, on the second part of that, which is the sort of development of the sort of logic of this, because there is a kind of logic to the way all of this works as it's woven through this story, even though it is a bananas idea that is delightful to read.
Part of it is at some point I read an article somewhere like the International Prototype Kilogram. What was an actual thing? Like for a while, there was in fact this hunk of platinum alloy, and then that was the definition of per kilogram. I mean, it's not anymore for reasons I'm about to get into. So you had like this hunk of metal in like this climate controlled space, and you had like a couple of other theoretically identical hunks of metal in other climate controlled spaces around the world. And once every couple of years, they would get these hunks of metal out, they would wash them off, and they would compare them to each other and go, "Oh, okay, they all have exactly the same mass. This is a kilogram." And one year they did that, and they were not the same mass. And then so that's sort of where I got the idea of, well, what if the kilogram wasn't constant? In real life there are a whole host of very boring, mundane reasons why that was. I wasn't going to write a story about those. And like was much more interesting to go, well, what if the kilogram was actually no longer a constant? And then from there you go to, well, why would the kilogram no longer be a constant? And you do that enough times and you get this. So that's part of it. Part of it is when I took physics in college, I had my professor was like, "You don't need a physics textbook. You just need the Feynman lectures on physics," which technically is a textbook, I guess. But we use the Feynman lectures on physics as a textbook. Anyway, the point is, there is a throwaway comment in I forget where it is now. I have the Feynman lectures. I could look this up again, but I don't want to because I'm afraid I will look and find out that I made this up in my head and this actually isn't there. But my memory is that there is a throwaway comment about about how at the beginning of the 20th century, physicists thought that they had basically solved physics. That I mean, not that everything was knowable, but that they had all the correct models, and at that point it was merely just sort of cranking the gears to figure everything out. And then this is the beginning of the 20th century. And then they discovered quantum phenomena. So it's a variant of the joke about how Greeks couldn't see how ancient Greeks couldn't see the color blue. I mean, obviously they could see the color blue, but it's the joke. So to some extent, this novel is sort of the extended joke of what if quantum physics genuinely did not exist until like 1920. And then if you have that conceit, you throw that in the mix and you suddenly end up with sort of this machinery. And then what if in the 1920s they added machinery to make quantum physics happen?
Hmm.
Hence the Scuds works, yeah.
So that's kind of how I got there. So to some extent, it's an extended joke on like what if quantum physics didn't exist until the 1920s.
Basically, you did a bit of alternate history.
No, or changing reality at that point. The touchstone I
Ah,
had for this, John, I don't know if you ever played, is basically World of Darkness's Mage the Ascension, where it's clear that over time reality's constants and have changed and been bouncing back and forth between magic and technology, and the technocracy has been making the world more mechanistic. And I kind of was like, oh yes, oh, so the technocracy created the skunk works. That makes perfect sense to me. Wait, John didn't play mage, I don't think.
I actually read the source book when I was in college,
Oh, okay.
but I never actually played it. But then, to some extent, I liked the idea of representing physics as this giant machine that's been patched over more times than you can count, where nobody is actually quite sure how it works. Because that's the thing. Because like that because like I said, there are sort of two things that I sort of keep stressing through the novel. One is that because the assumption that people would make, and it's sort of the thing that I wanted to squash, was that, well, if these are the people who maintain the machine, clearly they must have this perfect understanding of physics, and they so don't. They just kind of know what they know. There's just this massive machine. They're not sure how it got there. They decide that they're going to try to keep it running, but they don't really have a clue as to how it happened. Right. The other thing is that because you had mentioned sort of changing history, and the other thing that I wanted was that on one hand, the idea that there's this skunk works is theoretically common knowledge, but just nobody cares. Like the point is that there are these people who sort of decided, who have taken it upon themselves to go, oh, there's this machine, and if this machine breaks, we all die. Perhaps we should try to keep it running. But the general public, most people, it's just not really on their radar. And then there were sort of two reasons that I wanted to do that. One of which is what brought this up, which was that I didn't want to have to rewrite like 4,000 years of history, of human history. And then one way of avoiding that is to go, well, it's been there all along, but nobody cared. So for the most part, human history is kind of as we, is kind of as we know it. Like I didn't have to posit a universe where like Napoleon won Waterloo or something, which like I'm amazed at the people who can do that. I was not doing that for 4,000 years of history.
No, that's a lot.
Well, I mean, I'm picking it. Actually, it's probably more than 4,000. Either way, so that's one. But two, and then this is sort of a running theme through the novel that kind of gets hammered like pretty explicitly in the final chapter. But the idea that we have our institutions, that we have our organizations, that we have our structures, and they need to be and then we have to maintain, like, they need guardrails and they need active maintenance if we want them to work properly. And then so you look in the world, and that you can find any number of examples of structures and institutions that need guardrails, that need to be maintained, where you have people like perhaps working from the inside who will subvert those guardrails without so much as a second thought, and a lot of people for whom it's just not really on their radar. They're not particularly concerned. As far as they just assume things will work, and then so I wanted very much to portray that sort of situation. Oh no, I've broken you.
No, you totally broken me because now I'm like going down this like weird rabbit hole. And then in chat, someone was mentioning like special relativity and all of these things, and it made me think of Neil deGrasse Tyson in some podcast with some other physicist explaining that like if you get two people looking at the same star, but one is moving, and at the exact moment at which they're in the same spot, they don't actually see the same light, and it's some paradox I don't know the name of, and so and I just don't understand that. It makes no sense to me, and yet it's a thing. And so you're just describing like my brain's gonna break if I try to make sense of the universe that you've created, and that's because apparently there's some real stuff in it that physics is crazy, John. Like that, it's made by mad people.
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
But so part of it is that the conceit here is very much that you have this massively complicated machine, and then you have people trying their best to keep it working, but they don't have perfect knowledge of how it's supposed to work in the first place.
Yeah, it's an OS without it's an operating system without the manual. When I grok that, it's like, oh, so John's just drawing on his real life and
Yeah.
sticking that as the operating system for the universe.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I think to some extent that's true. I mean, the thing that I will say is that, and like I said, and I think this probably reflects my love of libraries and archives, because you notice that one of the things that happens in this book is, oh no, things are in trouble, we are in dire straits. What are we going to do? We're going to go to the library, and then so one of the things that I will say is that the skunk works, even though nobody knows how it works, is as represented in this novel probably way better documented than like some real life mechanisms. Because over the course of this novel, they visit two, not one, but two enormous archives whose sole purpose in life is to figure out, whose sole purpose in life is to collect documentation on how all of this works. So, and then but the point being that even then people are still confused.
Oh, I was thinking that in a weird way, this reminded me of, like, if we're just gonna go to some very classic Clarke's, was it third law, right? That any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable
Distinguished from
from
magic.
magic. And while I don't want to suggest that this is magic in the way that we would say, like in like high fantasy magic, there's an element of the fantastic in the sense that there's this machine that defies reason, that we can't fully make sense of, but we can sort of make sense of parts of it, and there are pieces of it we can understand. We just can't understand the whole. And I wonder if it's not the sufficiency in terms of the technology is like advanced per se. It is the scale that actually really matters here, because of what it is managing is simply beyond what humans can like comprehend at any one moment. It'd be like trying to be a scientist in all the sciences at once and be an expert in everything. That I just don't know that that's possible for a human, and then take that and put that at the scale of a universe. And so I don't know exactly where I'm going with this. It just made me think of that the Clarke's third law, and kind of helped me piece together the way that this book felt simultaneously very science fiction like, and also felt very fantastical in the ways that the characters interact with the machine. And I don't know if that was intentional on your part, but it was a feeling I got.
Oh no, that absolutely was intentional on my part. No, I mean, because Max Gladstone has like a like I forget, like this was like a ReaderCon panel. And he made sort of this great point that he pulled out his phone, and then this is true, that he basically said no one on earth understands every facet of how this phone works. Like you can find people and they can explain one part of it or another part of it, and then you may find people who can give you a holistic explanation, but not an incredibly deep one. But no one person understands how the phone works in every facet to the deepest possible degree. But and then this is a thing that you use every day. This is, and that and it is both incredibly fantastic and incredibly quotidian. And then that to some extent was also very much an inspiration for how I wanted the skunk works to come off. Is that it is this thing that you actually, since it's physics, whether you want to or not, you are engaging with it every day. You can't really opt out of physics. Like you may have an intuitive understanding of, well, if I drop something it's going to fall, but most people and you know can't explain to you, well, precisely. Actually, I don't know how many physicists can explain in like English like why it's falling.
Mm.
So that's so that was something that I very much wanted. It was that on one hand it is sort of in part based in science, but I also wanted to feel very fantastic.
The way I thought of this was like it's almost like Gödel's incompleteness theorem, that you can't understand the entirety of the universe just because no system can contain it all, but you can do your best and try to get pieces to work, but you pull something out like our protagonist does with unforeseen consequences, but an actual total totality of the whole system is possibly impossible, and just by the laws of physics. So, but you can look through a couple archives to see what you can do best, but in the end, numinous is not the quite word. It's not really a religious book, but like I want to try to find something better than fantastical, but like it's got like a weird focus. Up close we can see details, but the more we try to see more of it, the more of it turns be unable to reach and fully understand. It's a very nice balancing act you do.
Oh, thank you very much. And that's one of the reasons why, like when you first see the skunk works, I describe it as, I should remember my exact words, and I don't. But it's something. It's something like the creation of a mad plumber who failed perspectives class in art school. And actually, if you note the rest of that chapter, like I end up describing the skunk works in cubist terms, because the intent is that what you are seeing is stuff from multiple perspectives at once, because I wanted you to get that sense that that everything lines up, but it doesn't look that way. Everything looks a little mismatched and a little off, and I wanted that sense that no, you can't just sort of look at it and comprehend it.
So another question I kind of wanted to ask before we have to wind down here. We've been kind of talking about, we've talked about food, and we've talked about these characters and these familial relationships, and we've talked about the sort of underlying conceit of the story, the sort of technological, fantastical strangeness of the story. But there's also this I think, very interesting dynamic that the story presents in the way that the plot progresses. And by that, I'm mostly referring to the ways that our main character Ellie and Daniel get sort of brought into this conspiracy question mark
Great game.
about
Yeah.
this great game. Yeah, this great game of
Factions,
subterfuge and mystery that in us talking about how the machine is fundamentally mysterious in and of itself, there is this additional level of this mystery because things are happening within the machine that have made trying to keep things stable and correct complicated. The one thing that like really blew my mind was when you basically pulled out the idea that you could deliberately repeat a pattern and then not do that pattern the next time, and the system would think that you're repeating it, so you could have an event happen that shouldn't be possible simply because you've like deviated from a pattern that the machine expects to continue. And this creates one of the central problems that the story begins to address as it moves through. It's like, what does that do to this world? How does the physics of the world hold up? How does anything hold up when that is possible? And isn't this provide a loophole that you can do the crimes with? Um, and so I wanted you to talk a little bit about, I guess, like building up this tension and this mystery about a fundamentally mysterious machine object and kind of weaving in all of these threads of all these moving parts.
Okay, so the funny thing is that example actually comes from real life. I mean, not in that way, but and there's a set of microprocessor security exploits called Spectre that works in that way. I don't want to spend I don't want to spend too long getting into the nitty gritty of how microprocessors work because we'll be here for days. But but anyways, the point of the exploit is that you can basically trick the microprocessor into going down a path of code because that's the path that it has gone down the past X time. So we'll just go down that path again, even though it's not supposed to. And you can use that to tease out information that you otherwise wouldn't have access to. The novel spends a lot of time talking about security exploits, and that's basically the analogy. So part of part of it is that I'm taking things from real life and I'm either twisting them in some way or I'm amplifying them because again, if I'm treating the universe as this giant machine, then the ways that we can trick machines in real life are the ways that we can trick this giant machine.
Hmm.
I'm basically taking the things that I see in real life. I'm sort of mapping them onto my conceit, and again, sort of making things simultaneously as serious and but yet as absurd as I can at the same time. And then because this information is well, I mean, you don't want the information all at once, anyways, because it'll be boring. But because the information is being given to you piece by piece, I think that creates a certain amount of mystery as you are sort of, as sort of you are figuring out along with Ellie just what is happening.
It's very fun, and I like the touch, by the way, of the sister maybe planting bombs in the car and then having to defuse bombs. Which the first time that happened, I was like, "What the hell is going on?" And then the second time it happened, I was like, "Oh, okay. So these are like they're simultaneously threats, but also they're like tests of our characters' abilities in a sense."
Because particularly the second time is in Adi's driveway, and so that is also to some extent Adi putting Ellie through her paces. Because Adi could have defused the bomb much more quickly by
Yeah,
himself.
yeah. As our mentor figure, yeah.
Right, right, but he explicitly says this would be an interesting challenge for the two of you.
It has that very distinct, like a fantasy plot line that you would see in a fantasy where like you've got a power now and you must demonstrate your ability to use it, and yet the conceit is a sort of quasi science fictional universe machine,
Yes.
which is such an interesting blending of sort of I don't want to say tropes because I feel like that cheapens it, but I can't quite think of a better term for it because I think that shoving of those together is a very interesting choice in a way that I feel like sometimes we don't see as much of. And so I commend you for doing something wild.
Yeah, we don't. I mean, multiverse is kind of. I don't know if it's cooling off of Marvel, but this was a multi. I was excited. John's going to write a multiverse novel. It was not the multiverse novel I expected, but it's the multiverse novel we deserve and enjoy. It's, as you said, it's light and frothy and weird and strange and fantastical, as well as being about these two sisters.
Make sure when you read this, you have food though.
Yes. Oh God. Oh God. Bell.
You will be
All the
hungry.
bow. All the bow.
I don't know what it is, John. I already asked you about the food, but like there's moments where I was like, you had fun describing that food and all of the flavors and the smells and the tastes.
Especially when they get fit science fictional. Yes. The
Yeah,
planet
because I
ones. Yes.
100% started being like, okay, I need to get dinner now, because this is making me hungry.
Yeah, no, the food writing is great. I love writing about food. I mean, food and cooking has always been an interest. Like that's the thing that I've been interested in forever. Like for a while I was reading about molecular gastronomy, and that turned into a different story, not this one. Like I basically wrote this novel to see whether or not I could write a novel. So I didn't do a whole lot of research. So most of what's in the novel are things that interest me. So for example, there's a lot of references to musical theater,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of references to food, and then there are some references to weightlifting, and so for the most part I was just writing. So for the most part I was writing my interests.
I think we could say that you definitely wrote a novel. You succeeded.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I really enjoyed this. It was a lot of fun to read. I listened to the audiobook as well, and it's very well read. So A plus on the audiobook too. It's great. So we have to wind down, and so we have to ask John, what are you working on next that you're allowed to tell us about?
So there is another novel in the works. I am actually not sure what it's about yet. I'm hoping I will figure that out when I'm done with it. So that's happening. There are a couple of other pieces of writing that there's at least another piece of writing that I'm on the hook for. So those are the things in the near horizon. Yeah, I would talk more about the novel, except about the novel that I'm writing, except I genuinely don't know what it is yet.
Well, that answers any questions we had about writing style. You you
Um,
you
well,
you're not a plotter.
well, no, I told you I steal shamelessly from the improv playbook.
Yep. Yeah. That kind of puts you in that camp for sure. So where can folks find you now in virtual and in physical space?
Currently, I am mostly on Blue Sky. Like I am John Chu dot whatever. Like every in terms of social media, that's mostly where I am. Like I spend a little time on Mastodon. I feel like I should be posting more to Instagram more than I do, but I don't.
The algorithms of Instagram and Threads confuse me. So yeah.
Like social media is hard, and there's so much of it. And well, no, because that was the thing that I found hard as we got into this phase of the novel, was I felt like I had spent a year screaming on social media that I have a novel coming out, and swear to God, release day, somebody like sent me a message going, you have a novel coming out? I had no idea. I'm just like, okay, clearly
I know.
clearly I did not scream loudly enough or hard enough. But so social media is hard, people.
Yeah.
But mostly at most I mostly in terms of social media I'm mostly in Blue Sky right now.
It's the place to be. It's a lot happier.
That's some of the
Well,
alternatives. It
John,
is.
thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
No, thank you so much for inviting me. This has been a lot of fun.
I'm
That's what
glad
we
you
aim
enjoyed it.
for.
We enjoyed it too. Yeah, that's the goal. So for folks at home, thanks for coming to the show too. This is the end of the show. So if you'd like to let us know what you thought, if you've read the novel, for example, or I don't know, something else, or you have a question, skiffyandfanty@gmail.com is the easy way to do it. Or if you are in our Patreon Discord, you can go into our show discussion channel and talk about that. This show is on Blue Sky, Threads, Mastodon. We have YouTube videos and a whole bunch of other stuff. If you just want to find that, go to skiffyandfanty.com/skiffythings, and there's links to all of our stuff. You can find us again every Friday, 7 p.m. Central on twitch.tv/alphabetstreams for the live format, almost every Friday of the year. And then obviously you can get them the way that you're getting it now. And then if you really like the show and want to help us out, the best thing to do is honestly tell people about the show. That would be the number one thing. Reviewing us on the apps is nice, but also if you have money you don't need, an emphasis on that last part, don't need, patreon.com/skiffingfanty. Any amount of money is welcome. $1 is the lowest amount you can give, and $1 is nice, and we're perfectly happy with it. But please do not give us money if you need it for medication, food, or feeding your children, or anything of that sort. Okay? You save that for yourself. We're just a podcast. So there you go.
So we'd like to thank our Patreon supporters, so we're going to list them out here for you. Andrea the Alluring, Cameron the Chthonic, Carolyn the Benevolent, Carrie the Divine, Chris the Candescent, Dan the Transient, Daniel the Cultured, David the Debonair, Erica the Esteemed, Jeff the Gracious, Joseph the Jovial, Juan the Junctional, KB the Kind, Karen the Kickass, and I see you just changed the script. Andrea the Alluring, Abiding, and 10 exclamation points. So there you go.
We will never be consistent on Andrea.
We are never consistent on Andrea. It's a running gag at this part.
Kat the Kinematic, Matthew the Magnificent, Paul the Pious, Robert the Reliable, Robin the Bold, Ryan the Resilient, Sarah the Sensational, Sarah E. the Sublime, Sarah O. the Rapturous, Stephen the Strange, Tari the Thorough, Tanya the Triumphant, and Trish the Imperturbable. I'm at SeanDuke.net. Just put /Duke things. You will find all of my nonsense there. And then I also go on the same Twitch channel Wednesdays and Sundays at 6 p.m. Central, and Paul is sometimes there.
I am indeed. I'm the one that has to be the cleric or get shot a lot. Anyway, you can find me at princejustin.com and Prince Justin with the V all over the internet, except the Nazi places.
All right. Skiffy and Fanty bylaws require me to make it hopeful. And I will just note that no matter how dark the world is, remember that there are delicious foods that you can eat, some of which nature provides you for free. So if you have any nature place that you can walk in, you may be able to find free berries and other kinds of things that you can enjoy. Just don't overharvest. And, summer's here. So, go enjoy it. I don't know. That's what I got to say. Enjoy good food. And so, on that note, hopeful ending and scene.
And scene.
If you want to support this show, you can go to patreon.com/skiffyandfanty or skiffyandfanty.com, our website, where you can get access to all of our fancy things. Our music comes from Holy Mole. You can support him and his work at patreon.com/holymole. Thank you for listening.